there's a need to take action today despite trying to plan out certain things and to perfect them and to hone in on them.
I can't relate. Hello, everybody. We are back for episode 15, Fireside Chat numero 5. So today we are going to get a little serious. I've done some self-reflection. Kirk's done some self-reflection. So we're going to have, I would consider a little more personal conversation today.
Totally agree, man. Totally agree. I feel like it's been a few weeks, but I think the few weeks have been pretty damn good in terms of self-reflection. To your point, right? I'm pretty excited to think through this and have this conversation. I'm pretty sure it's going to be completely polar opposites, but man, it's definitely been an interesting few weeks. So hopefully everybody out there is making some things happen, man.
Absolutely. So for me, one of the big things that I've actually been thinking about is getting a little, we'll say, emotional with my younger self. I've been processing information. And one of the big things that I think a lot of people can relate to is when I was younger, I had the feeling that I didn't fit in. It doesn't necessarily matter where it was. I always knew individuals. I was always in a little group, but for some reason, regardless of the group that I was in, I always felt like I was the odd man out. And we're talking 10, 15 in that age. So always the teenage years, you're always feeling a little weird. You're always a little figure yourself out, we'll call it. But throughout this time, I would always be in a group and I could relate to a certain extent, right? So I wasn't dumb. I was an athlete. I was, I'm Hispanic, so a little bit diverse. I can kind of fit into every little group, but I never had a group that made me feel like 100% completely at home. And as I've gone through and started to better myself and tell my younger self that there was a lot of things that I did incorrectly and that I can do them, and proving myself correct now, I've started to feel that way again in different groups. But now I'm, 30. It's a lot longer. I've been in this growth journey for a long time. So I'm able to self-reflect and understand where those feelings came from. And the other day I fucking figured it out. And it may not be true for everything, but at least this portion of it is true now. And it has been true in a lot of situations. And that feeling of not fitting in for me, I would always frame it as myself being unworthy of something, being a little weird, right? I would always have the self-conscious thought rather than the empowering thought. And this is part of why I'm going through this whole journey, is to change that mindset, right? That is a reflex that's built to go to the self-conscious, to go to the doubt and go to the negative, has been a trained thought. Have I been overly negative? I mean, you know me personally, you've known me from 22 years old, 23 years old, and I'm not overly negative externally, but internally, there's always a little bit of doubt. There's always a little bit of, hesitation when it comes to fully understanding myself. So in relation to this conversation, I always had self-doubt in groups, whether I thought that I was weird, whether I thought that it was me for some sort of reason. Now that I'm out here playing baseball, I also am now in a group of individuals that aren't trying to achieve the same thing that I'm trying to achieve, right? So in this group, for some reason, I have those same feelings, not for the same reasons, but for some reason, I just feel like I don't fully fit in. The context of the conversations that we have is always a little bit different. People's interests are a little bit different than mine. And I always find myself kind of just like, I can't relate, right? So when it comes to people's level of practice and dedication towards what they want to achieve, when it comes to the sport of baseball, again, I'm like, I can't relate. People go out, they go to the bars, they go to hang out. I can't relate. So I'm starting to get those feelings of fucking like odd man out. Like there's something that I'm doing that's wrong and different. And the other day I sat down and I really thought about it. And when it comes down to it is, I'm not trying to achieve the same thing that everyone else is trying to achieve. Therefore, I am different. I am the odd man out 100%. What I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to achieve is 100% different. So my reality was framed correctly, right? I am different. I don't fit in. My expectations are different. But the problem that I was always having at a younger age is I was always go to the self-conscious. I would always go, it's my fault, right? There's something wrong in my being different, in my desires being different, in my not fitting into that group, when in reality, it's my desires are leading me down a different path, right? There's people on my team that don't want to get better, that want to just play the sport to play the sport, right? They're not going to want to practice. They're not going to want to throw. They're not going to want to go to sleep on time to get better, to heal, to be able to go to the gym the next day. But I've that clicked for me when it came to baseball because it was a feeling that I had in the past and a feeling that I have now. And I'm now able to correlate that. But now that I'm thinking about it in true holistic fashion, the same thing happens with work, right? When we're in a group of work, when we're in a work environment, there's always a group of people that go out, hang out on the weekends, have fun. They have a little niche and they kind of click together and you have your work group. And I've always been kind of externally outside of that. I was never able to relate that to the same thing as sports because I wasn't in a work environment when I was in that self-conscious mindset, right? I was in a work environment when I was working on improving myself. So it clicked just naturally. It's not something that I just had to sit back and explain, right? It wasn't a doubt and now there's no doubt, or I had a self-conscious thought and now there's no self-conscious thought. So as I've gotten older and I'm in new environments, I've had my current mentality and I was never able to relate my prior feelings as a younger kid to that thought and actually being back in baseball, actually trying to get better, actually interacting with different people and understanding that my thoughts, feelings, emotions are all very different from what other people have to think. Like literally just like, and finally I understood why. Now, I also understood that in the past, I may have not had the best mindset, but that's what we're here for. And that's why we're growing. So if you feel like you don't fit in, if you feel like there's something wrong with you and that you're different, you may be, but for me, that's actually intentional. That's actually what I wanted. And it's not because I'm bad in any way, shape, or form, or not good enough in any way, shape, or form. It's because I want more. And that's always been a point of just unconscious doubt. I mean, it may be conscious at some point, it was, but I always felt like I wasn't good enough. I always felt like I didn't fit in, when in reality, I was trying to be significantly better. And I didn't fit in because of the fact that I was trying to be significantly better. And I was trying to just outdo myself, get better, like be better as a human being. And that's not a fucking common thing that people want to do, man. It's
Well,
not.
so you just unpacked a lot, truthfully. Like you got like 75 different bullet points that I could digress into right now. I think the first thing that you have to state, man, is I think we don't see that side of people. Like there's certainly a lot of people that go out and party on the weekends. They're not, they work the 9 to 5, right? Monday through Friday. That's it. They work for the weekend. There's that group of people, right? And there's another group of people, to your point. I think that as we grow, and this is something that I've noticed, and it may not be age related, but it's been time related, is that the older that I've become, the more introverted I've become. In sense of, I used to enjoy random conversations. I used to enjoy trying to mingle with people, and I still do, but it's become harder and harder to find conversation to have, because I want the conversation to be good fucking conversation. I don't want it to be, I don't like, occasionally I'll try to like fake a conversation around baseball where it's like, oh, you like baseball too, right? And we start going into it. Like, listen, I enjoy a game of baseball, or I enjoy a game of football, but I don't know all the stats and I don't know all that. And I think we've talked about that a few times, right? So it's like I try to digress in conversation that I am not passionate about, which in turn I've now stopped doing that, unless it's very minimal, unless I'm in a car with somebody and I have to make conversation and I'm not trying to be extremely awkward, right? But to your point, like I'm very much introverted, dude, because it's very hard to find people that are like-minded in a sense of where you're at in your journey of life, right? That's the other side of it. And then kind of going into another bullet point is like everybody's definition of success is different. The way they think about things, how they think about things, they may be going through the motions with their 9 to 5 or their group of people that they're around because they're doing it as a means of activity. However, their mind may lie somewhere else in terms of what, similar to you, you're trying to focus on your podcast, your personal development, your personal growth. They could still be doing the same thing. But I think my next bullet point to try to keep up here with all your your bullet points would be like, we're a mockingbird. Like if you take away the people who are not trying to grow and they're just working their 9 to 5 to the weekend, like we're just mocking what is trending with people, right? So like whatever's trending on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. So people are trying to have, conversations that we may consider, unproductive, and it's not something that we're interested in, but they're also trying to fit into your point because they feel the same way that you feel. So they're finding a way to connect with people, but they're not doing it authentically. They're just doing it in any means of validation that they can get externally. And that's where you're like, I'm not going to put myself there, because you don't feel a need or a desire to put yourself into a position to feel a part of something anymore, because you're okay with it. Like you may still feel that a little bit now, but I think really, dude, like what I've come to terms with, and I think we hit on this a little bit a few episodes ago. I didn't really do a good job conveying my message, but there's so many different stereotypes out there. And as you've grown and I've grown, like we can be a part of so many different, we'll call them clubs, right? Whatever it may be that we're interested in. I think back in the day, at least my mind when I was younger, I used to feel as though if I liked a certain thing, I'd have to dress and mirror that. I'd have to listen to that music that came with that lifestyle. I'd have to drive a car that came with that lifestyle, right? Where now it's just like I can be whoever I want to be and do whatever I want to do with no boundary. And I think that changes the game, where you start to shift that unconfident mindset to where you don't necessarily feel like you should be in that clique. And you're like, I can do whatever I want, wear whatever I want. I don't have to like I don't have to, if I want to, like I look at Adam Sandler, right? This dude's multi-millionaire. He wears basketball and one shorts and a polo shirt with a pair of Air Jordans on. Like he looks like he literally just threw something on that was right beside his bed. Yeah. And got out and then went to go do a podcast with Joe Rogan. I'm like, dude, you look like you rolled out of bed and just threw on, but he's doing it on purpose. He's just doing whatever he wants to do. Right. And I think that's where I'm starting to get in life, where I still feel uncomfortable, or I don't want to say I'm confident. I feel like I shouldn't belong in this group of people and or in this conversation. But I also try to tell myself, like, says who? Me, right? The environment that I create in my head can be a stark difference in what the external factors are looking at. So I always try to be a constant reminder, like, who says I can't do this, wear this, listen to this, speak through this, or talk to this? And why does it have to be that way? There's no more molds, right? I think the molds are just, we continue to allow them up here, which then creates that conversation. So those are my bullet points when I look at everything that you're going through. I definitely think that introverts, extroverts, like we're changing over time. The less people we need around us, the less people we need to fake conversation with, the more true to ourselves that we're trying to become. But then you also have to look at it from the other side of that spectrum, and that piece of it where I think like you still need to meet new people. You still need to have new conversations. Maybe they need you more because they need to see that spark in their own life, or they need to be like, man, if you're doing it, maybe I can do it too. Like, so like then you have to look at helping people along the way, right? Where other people may feel the same way you do, but they're scared to discuss things further.
There's literally one guy that's teeter-tottering on the edge of commitment when it comes to the sport, at least. I know that there's other aspects of their life that aren't the same, but there's like literally one person that's like teeter-tottering out of the group of 22. So yes, it's not everybody. And yes, there are people that are kind of there along the journey. And that's the one person that I can actually have a little bit more detailed conversation with. One of the things that you mentioned that is really funny, that I don't know if this happens to you guys with other people that you know, but Kirk and I seem to be on the same brainwave sometimes. And we don't talk as much as you guys might think, right? There's a couple text messages here and there, and then this is our main form of conversation in reality. So it's like we don't have a bunch of separate conversations. So one of the things that I wrote down literally right here, that's a topic of conversation that I had for this, is how many people have thoughts and opinions on things they don't know about, to try to fit in, to try to talk about, to seem smarter, to just literally just talk aimless conversation. That's one of the things that I've stopped doing in a separate conversation. But I just wanted to show you that like we have thoughts that kind of just interact very nicely randomly, and it doesn't happen on purpose. But what is on your mind today, sir?
Listen, man, I think what's on my mind is the hourglass of life, right? The more time, we spend, the less of it that we have left. In terms of just taking action specifically. When you look at having goals, you look at setting up those goals. I think, we try to like plan a lot of things. We try to take a lot of notes, over prepare. We rehearse and we rehearse and we rehearse. And that can mitigate a lot of different things for us, right? What's been crazy to think about over the past few weeks for me is that I don't want to wait and wait to take action. Like, I think, when you look at the podcast and where we've come from just in January, and you look at what you've got coming outside of it, I think we forget a lot as time progresses. I don't want to say envious. Envious is probably a terrible word, but we become envious of others and their success and what they've had to put in to get to where they're at. We don't look at as often, right? We just talk about, hey, your podcast is doing great, or your business is doing great, or your professional life is going fantastic, but we forget about the amount of time that it takes to get to that point. And I think we've discussed it, and I call it the Hollywood highlight reel. It's probably the way that I look at it, is that you see those quick, 45-second TikTok videos or reels about somebody's success, or a bunch of pictures of what's led up to their success. But we don't get credit from a timing perspective, right? But the other side of that hourglass I look at is like, you've got to find a way to hurry, man, to hurry to celebrate life, or hurry to take action. Because no matter how much we rehearse things and how much we talk about things and how much we plan things, it may never be what we think it's going to be. It completely changes as we start to dip our toe in the water, right? And that just comes back to like perception is reality. And that whole thought process is that, reality changes based upon externally versus internally. Like how we view life up here about being nervous for something or taking that plunge for something completely changes after we start it, right? The way we start to get nervous and think through things, we tell ourselves a bunch of things in our head, but it never happens like that, right? And really where I'm going with this, man, is there was somebody that I knew that passed away recently, and I wasn't super close with him by any means, but he did have an impact in my career. Like he was just a standout dude. Whenever he spoke to you, you felt like you've known him for a long time. Very genuine in his approach, right? And we shared a lot of similar podcasting episodes, right? We used to kind of, a couple years ago, we would ship each other podcasts all the time. Like, hey, we're listening to this. What do you think about that? Hey, what do you think about this excerpt from Joe Rogan or from Jocko or from David Goggins or, TED Talks, whatever it may have been. We exchanged those messages, right? And we had always talked about starting a podcast one day and, conversing from a self-development perspective. And, he just started his podcast recently for work just a few weeks ago, man. And then he passed away unexpectedly. Nobody knew a thing. And the moral that I look at are three different things. Number one, I look at the hourglass of life, right? So, you don't have a limited amount of time, right? It's finite. So what are you doing with it? And we don't know. Like, we know that the time is finite, but we don't know how much time we have left. And we have all these things planned out for our life from a timeline perspective. My goal has always been like, I've been very specific of my goals from a 5-year perspective and a 10-year perspective, right? The in-between, I haven't been meticulously detailed about. I just said I wanted to be here by 25, by 30, by 35, by 40, 45, etc. And they've all come true, right? I didn't go into the, hey, every 6 months type of job planning and, succession planning or anything like that. But I manifested it from a point of view. Like, I just feel like this is where I'm going to be at, man. And everything's played out that way. Right. But did I spend too much time thinking through that? Or did I give myself too much time to reach these goals? Could I have reached these goals sooner? Right. Because when you start to give yourself expiration dates, is what I'll call them. You say, I'm going to be here by 40 years old. And I think Elon Musk has something along the same lines where he talks about it. It's like, try to, work like, take 10 years of work and cram it into one, right? You may not finish it all in 10 years, but you're going to be a lot further along than other people.
That's exactly it.
When you look at the other side of that, time is finite, right? So going back to that statement, like, okay, I don't mind hustling and grinding. There's nothing wrong with that. And I enjoy that side of it because I love the work that I do and the work that we do and what we're doing personally and individually from a personal perspective. But how much time do you waste in that without giving second thought to other things in life? So balancing that specifically around what's going to make you a better human being. And I think we've done that. I think you've talked about doing that. Everything that I do is trying to be a better human being, not just for myself, but for my family and for those that are around me. Going back to my time reference, like, instead of 5 years? Could I have accomplished it in 2.5 years? Did I give myself too much time to reach this goal? Right. And I don't know the answer to that quite yet. I'm still reflecting over that because everything that I have planned out from a timeline perspective has come true. So now it's like, do I need to ramp up the level of intensity to get there? Because I could probably accomplish a lot more sooner. And indirectly, I manifest my timelines exactly to what I wanted. Does that make sense where I'm going with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting because it depends on what it is. Because success takes time. One of the interesting things, and we were touching on it in relation to how things progress, is just very simply, they take a lot longer than you think. In reality, things take a lot longer than you think, but they happen a lot faster. And it's so fucking weird to just think about that, right? Because on a day to day, it feels like it takes forever. But then you look back and it wasn't that long, right? And we were having that conversations in regards to we're having that conversations in regards to like the other YouTube channel that I have, and it took me a year to reach a certain point, and I've doubled that in 3 months, right? So if I look back on the original first year, that day to day felt really, really slow, right? And then now I'm looking at it and everything feels really, really fast. I've made more progress than I thought I was going to make because time goes on and things get exponentially better.
So I want to stop you right there. That's actually a good point. That's where I'm trying to go with this. So essentially, and you just made this click for me for a second. All right. So essentially, when I made these goals for myself, I was 18. All right, 18, 19. So let's fast forward now, 33. Let's do some math there. It's been 15 years. Okay. So when I made these goals 15 years ago, I had parameters in mind and timelines in mind. But what I did not calculate was experience learned over time should help expedite the process. So I said in 15 years, I'll be here 5, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Okay. What I have not recalculated on is that the experience has allowed me to replace the sheer volume of the work that I did 10 years ago to become where I'm at today. The amount of podcasts, the amount of books, the amount of hard lessons that I had to learn, the amount of failures that took place every day in poor decisions, and then understanding the unintended consequences of those decisions have become less and less over time. Right. So then I had not recalibrated and said, okay, all right, I'm 33 now. I plan to be here at 38. And then by 40, I plan to do this. Right. And I have those goals written out and written down. That's where my brain's at from a manifestation perspective. Yeah. And I have every reason to believe that I'll get there based on my past 15 years. But maybe it's time for me to expedite those timelines because my experience can now change my calculation.
Or increase the goal by more than you think.
Or increase to your point. Okay. So, or I can increase the goal, right? So, but I don't want to increase, I guess from a stoic perspective, I don't want to increase the goal too much because like as time goes on, that's where you can come into that. And this is probably a poor way to look at it, but from a complacency perspective, like we always move the goalpost in life. Like it's just never enough. You remember 5 years ago, if you were doing this right now, making the money we make right now, we would be so proud of us, right? And if you go back to 18-year-old Kevin and I go back to 18-year-old Kirk, like the kids that we were those years ago would be proud of where we're at today. Because this is everything that we've dreamed of. This is everything we thought through, right? Granted, there's still a lot more progress to be made. But I also yes, I want to be extremely successful and have a life of freedom, right? And that's what we've discussed as a family. That's what you and I have discussed. But I also don't want to continue to say, okay, well, I can just do 5 more years. If I do 5 more years, I can go from being this to this, and then we can continue to do this, right? Going back to 18-year-old Kirk, like this is all I wanted to do. I just want to retire in Costa Rica by 45 and surf and drink Mai Tais on the beach, right? And then have a bar and grill afterwards and just, make money that way. I could still be financially successful. I'll be financially free, support my kids. I don't know what that looks like specifically, but all in all, that's where my head's at is how far am I going to continue to move the goalpost, right? How can I expedite my timelines based on the experience calculator that we just discussed? But then how can I look at the hourglass of life, understanding that it's finite, that we don't know how much time we have, right? So that there's still a need to plan and to have a succession plan for the family, for ourselves in the next 10, 15 years, 20 years. But there's also an immense need to be exceptionally present, not just with your family, but for yourself. There's a need to take action today, despite trying to plan out certain things and to perfect them and to hone in on them. Just take action on the things that you want to do today, no matter how messy it can get. That's where I'm at with that whole hourglass of life, right? So I've been trying to put myself in uncomfortable positions, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, to start taking action more frequently. Things have been populating my brain where I'm like, oh, I'll get to that. But it's like, will I get to that? Or do I need to throw that away and just say, I'm not going to get to that? So I'm not creating an unrealistic expectation of myself, but I'm sticking to the timelines and the goals of which that make me the most excited for life today, tomorrow, and the next year, right? So that's my closing statements. That's where I'm at with my head right now. And I don't know the answer. I don't have the answer, but it's been weighing heavy. Is that when I wake up in the morning and when I go to sleep at night, are you 100% happy with the efforts and energy you pushed out today, right? Professionally and personally. And if you're not, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Happiness is temporary from a feeling, but like you enjoyed it. You made the right moves. You said, goodbye to the right people. You told the people around you how much you truly love them, as much as possible. And your actions are congruent with that. That's the way I look at that hourglass piece, right? So, and that's the way I'm looking at the next 5 or 10 years is I can expedite some timelines to get back and to use more time where necessary, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that you mentioned that I find interesting is it sounded to me like you were questioning, and I don't know what it was specifically, but in the context of the conversation, the last couple 30 seconds, you said that you have an expectation, and is that expectation reality? And one of the things that I've learned how to do that's very interesting, and I'm curious about you to see if this resonates with you in any way, shape, or form. Whenever you're forming your expectation or your 5-year plan or whatever it is that you want to achieve, are you looking at it through the filter of your track record, or are you looking at it through the filter of general possibility? Meaning, is it humanly possible? Has someone else on planet Earth done it?
That's a good question.
Because for me, that changed a lot. And it's made me work harder once I understand that, very simply, if it's been done, I can do it, right? It's just a matter of me figuring out how to do it. The same thing with the 4-minute mile. Remember, nobody ran a 4-minute mile until 19 something. And then like literally 3 years later, over 1,000 people had done it because one person actually did it, right? So if it's physically possible and we don't see it as possibility, then it does become physically impossible because we're not able to perceive that thing. But if you look at your goal and compare it to what someone else has achieved, it becomes a little bit more reasonable and rational. Do you know how to do it? No. Do you know if you can do it? No. But I like to look at things from the frame of just general possibility. Is it physically possible? Has someone done it? And if my goal has been achieved, then I know it's possible. It's just a matter of like, how do I achieve it? Like, we no longer go through like, hey, for example, let's say you want to be a millionaire in 2 years, right? You have to sit down, you have to plan, you have to figure out what it is. You have to learn a shit ton of skills, and it may take you longer than 2 years, right? But it's physically possible. Someone's done it. Now the question is how, right? And that's not my particular goal. I'm working on other stuff, but it's just like, that's kind of my frame of reference. I don't ever really see anything now as unachievable or unattainable. It's just a matter of like, do I want to put in the work to actually do it? Right. And that's how I see it, is through a realm of possibility. Is that something that you consider when you're actually like just planning out your stuff?
100%. I think you have to look at it from a couple different perspectives. And I think, I can't remember his name right now, man. I can't remember his name, but the quote itself is like the magic. It's something along the lines of like, the magic begins in the work that you're not willing to do. Right. So what I mean by that is I came across that last night and I come across it frequently. It's a very powerful quote, is I think that, going back to the first book that I gave you, right, The Law of the Lid, if I were to try to make my future contingent upon my track record, I think I would lid myself. Because after you see things for so long, and you look at 15 years, you put a lid on your own ability, on accident, right? And like you have to be aware of that. Those that are very successful are aware that there's a lid or a ceiling out there, but they're constantly pushing through it. They have that feeling that says, oh, I should probably go do this, because if not, there's a ceiling that you're going to hit. So I look at it in the same regard that you do, but I'm very hyper aware that the first statement that you made, like based on track record, could actually cripple me. It could slow me down. It could bring me down to a point where it's like, okay, maybe I can't become a millionaire. Maybe I'm not going to be a successful podcaster because of time. I think it's very easy within a fast-paced world that we live in today that time is not on your side in terms of how you view yourself from an expectation, where you may say it may take you a year, 2 years, 3 years to become very successful. And if you look at your track record, we think of track records in the short term, not the long term, right? So we're like, if this can't be possible now and we start something off and we're 6 months into this podcast, we may lose steam and then it may never happen, right? So I look at things in terms of like what's legitimately possible outside of my own mind. To your point, like, hey, it's done. There's millionaires out there, TikTokers out there, YouTubers out there that have progressed over time and they're making it. So I'm going to continue to plow through until there's a breakthrough, right? Until you break through that ceiling specifically. So I'm more focused on, what's possible and why not me versus trying to follow my own track record or somebody else's, because I think that could cloud our vision, right? And what I was referring to from an expectation perspective is that, like, there's just so many different things that you want to dive into, man. And you can dive into those things, but it's just like, is now the right time? Because there's a lot of things that I'm very interested in, but there's not a lot that I'm very interested in passionately, like from a desire perspective. I'm not all in. Like, I'm not all into guns, and I'm not a gun wizard. I love blowing things up and I love shooting them and I can break them down. I love cars, but I'm not a car wizard. I can take them apart, timing belts, and change them and research it, but I'm not like a car head, like a gear head specifically, right? So there's so many different things that I'm interested in just from a desire perspective. I'm learning now to limit that. It's like, okay, like I'm just not there yet. There's no reason to mess around with A, B, or C right now until I can continue to divulge in what's in front of me, so I'm not distracted from everything else. Like, I park and lot that passion that I may want to touch, right? So it just depends, man, whatever chapter I'm in specifically, but it's definitely the latter of your statement. I'm more fixated on what's possible and why not me.
Makes perfect sense, my friend. I think that was a good one. Any final thoughts, any summary thoughts? For me, it's going to be, you may not fit in, but you're not supposed to.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's been on my mind for quite some time, but I'm getting to a place where I'm okay with where I stand on that. 100%. I don't want to fit in. And if I feel that feeling, I'll feel it for a second. I felt it last night. Literally felt it last night for a second. I think people judge the hell out of me because of how I look, right? So I'm extremely successful, financially successful, stuff like that. And I ran into an old guy last night. He was extremely rude, right? And it was my fault. I made a mistake on what I was looking at, and I apologized for that. But the guy's response was just so nasty. And for a minute, I got mad. I wanted to be like, this guy has no idea. And I assumed, I could be assuming incorrectly, but I assumed that the guy was just judging me and my family based on what we looked at, based on stereotyping, right? Versus just, he could have been like, no, you made a mistake. It's right there. Here's what it is. Yada, 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 right? So, but internally, I felt like, man, I don't fit in to that conception of, or that mindset of that person's idea of success. But that success is all anecdotal, man. Like, we define success for ourselves internally, not externally. And I think that we from a societal perspective, don't look at it that way because we're very much materialistic. We define success as, if you were still to ask a handful of people, you would still define success as somebody who drives a Mercedes or a BMW, lives in a nice neighborhood, lives in a nice house, right? But all of those people, we know statistically 50-60% of them are living paycheck to paycheck, right? They just have a really good job. So we have to look at success internally versus externally, right? So that same mindset I thought about last night, like, I didn't fit in for a second. I'm like, I don't need to fit in. Who the fuck says I need to belong to this chapter or this segment to be successful or to feel financially successful? Why do I have to drive or live in these environments for me to feel like I'm successful? I don't have to. So you have to constantly tell yourself that, because the outside world is telling you, no, that's not success. That's not what you should be doing. You need to have this money or this car or this status for you to feel successful, right? So it's very hard for for your people who feel like you to understand that and to tell themselves no internally, right? It's a constant battle for sure. But my closing statement is just looking at the hourglass of life, man. It's a finite amount of time. So you really need to take action. You've got to take action today, no matter how sloppy it may look on what you want to take action on. And you need to discuss that with yourself, right? And to your point, I think we both concluded a shared message of like, hey, where we were at 5 years ago and 10 years ago, young Kirk and young Kevin would be exceptionally proud of how far we've made it, right? So like you've got to go back and tell yourself that, and like you should take a trip down memory lane for yourself and say, hey, holy shit, whether it's taken 5 years or 10 years, man, it may take you 10 years to get to that breakthrough 1 year for shit to change, for you to scale. 10 years for just 1 year to change your entire life, man. So don't slow down, don't give up, don't get complacent. It may take that much time, right? It could take 2 years, it could take 5 years, right? But just keep going. Everything will click. Finite amount of time, my friend. So take action, right?
What do you guys truly want? Not a lot of people can answer that question, but think about it. What do you truly want? Answer that for yourself.
Till next time.